Kaleb Johnson, right? Kaleb Johnson, you know, I was very high on Kaleb Johnson coming out of college. I really, really liked his tape at Iowa. You know, some concerns in the receiving game, but I also kind of chalked it up a little bit to, playing in an offense that doesn't really throw the football a ton. And, he lands in Pittsburgh. I did not like the landing spot. I've been pretty adamant about that. He goes to a system with Arthur Smith where I think a lot of people thought it would be a good landing spot, right? But I'm not really loving it. He rushed 8 times for 20 yards. I'm not super concerned about the preseason performance for him. 8 rushes, 20 yards, right? That offensive line, not great. 1 catch for 1 target, 1 catch, 6 yards against the Jaguars. But I think Kaleb Johnson right now, he's being drafted somewhere in the high 20s at the running back position right now. He's actually RB 28, pick 74 off the board. Running backs that go in front of him are Tony Pollard, Isaiah Pacheco, Joe Mixon, and RJ Harvey. For what it's worth, I'm not drafting Joe Mixon. I would take Kaleb Johnson over Joe Mixon. I still am surprised that Mixon's price is that high still. Guys that go behind him are Brian Robinson Jr., Tyrone Tracy, and his running mate Jaylen Warren. I'll kick it over to you, Cody, first, since we started with Tyler last time. Kaleb Johnson, are you concerned? Does the preseason performance matter to you at all? Are you buying? Are you in love with him? I mean, he could be a workhorse. Jaylen Warren's now there. You have Kenny Gainwell. What are your thoughts on this running back room? And is he a guy that you would be targeting in your fantasy drafts?
Yeah, the preseason performance doesn't bother me, so to speak, but I will say that I'm not necessarily high on any Pittsburgh Steeler right now. I think a lot of us have been scratching our heads at what the Steelers have been doing. It seems like they've been trying to bridge gaps for the last several years with quarterback play and with bringing in, DK Metcalf and different guys. I think that there can be some value here. I do think at pick 29, I don't hate that as far as ADP for a running back goes, that's pretty late, especially if he's going to get quite a bit of work. Last year, 1,500 rushing yards and 21 touchdowns for Iowa. Pete, you mentioned that Iowa, they haven't been, that team that's aired out the ball a lot. I think we see a lot of tight ends that come into the league from Iowa who we end up valuing a lot lower, and then we realize they can catch passes. It's just Iowa didn't throw the ball. People like George Kittle and Sam Laporta come to mind. But I would say that with Kaleb Johnson, he's got 4.5 speed, so he's probably not going to break away too much. Yeah, he didn't get it done a ton in the passing game in college, but I do think that there's enough talent there to be somebody who can surprise us and outperform his ADP. At RB 28, 29, like we mentioned, I think there are guys before him that I would rather have, but I would rather have him over. I think there are guys after him that I would rather have, but I would have him over as well. It might be the perfect spot for him then, if that's the way I'm thinking about it. I'm curious to see what Tyler thinks, but I would say it's probably a pretty fair average draft position for him, and it's probably one that I think I would be taking at that price.
Cool. Tyler, what are your thoughts, man?
So actually for me, I'm going to go a little bit of the other way. And the reason why I'm kind of looking over here, I was trying to look up real quick the stats from when you had both Bijan and Tyler Algier be successful, not last year, but the year before it, an Arthur Smith offense. And I looked up, as far as attempts go, you had Bijan with 214 and Algier with 186. So for me, I feel like seeing Kaleb struggle so early, obviously it's a rookie running back. He's still trying to figure things out. But I think the workhorse mentality might be a little bit of a stretch, especially here at the start. Jaylen Warren's basically went forgotten about at this point. We talked about him being behind Brian Robinson and those guys. And Arthur Smith's already proven that he likes to use multiple running backs in his system. His favorite running back to use, it felt like years ago, was Cordero Patterson. Now he's not on the team anymore, but he does like to use multiple running backs. I think this is an offense that does want to run the ball, but we also know who's at quarterback, and that's Aaron Rodgers. And so he also kind of acts like an offensive coordinator on the field. If he gets a play call, he may go along with Arthur Smith for the first little bit of the season, but if he sees something not working, we know that he's going to audible at the line. And so if he gets a play call that he doesn't like, he may change it. He may check it away and seeing Kaleb drop that ball in the first preseason game, it hit him in the hands. I can't imagine that Aaron Rodgers is going to, favor that very heavily. So I think he'll probably be looking for Jaylen Warren to be in there as a check down option if needed.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. Bringing up Rodgers is super important when talking about this. Rodgers is going to have somewhat control, right? We talked about Josh Allen and Ty Johnson. Quarterbacks having a comfort with the guy that's out there on passing downs is super important for a quarterback, right? Making sure the guy's in the right spot, making sure he can, is going to be able to hold up in pass protection, right? All that stuff matters. And we have seen in the past with Aaron Rodgers, he is a guy that typically does not, get the ball to rookies in the pass game. Typically, he does not always favor rookies. And when you look at this offense last year, they were number 5 in the NFL in rush rate. So I think Kaleb is going to have a very high floor when it comes to the volume, right? But the efficiency is the biggest concern for me. This is a team that it's DK Metcalf and nobody else. It's Freiermuth, who, don't get me wrong, I like Freiermuth. You have Jonnu Smith, but ultimately there are not a ton of weapons. And so realistically, I think a lot of teams, depending on how they deploy the tight ends, if you're running 2 tight ends out there, right, it's going to lead teams to being able to bring in bigger backs, right, run more base, right, and then ultimately, be able to stop the run, you would think, because they have bigger bodies out there, because it's not going to be a team that's going to spread you out, right? Because they don't have the weapons for that. Maybe we see like an Amari Cooper signing, but ultimately the receiving volume is my concern with Kaleb. I look at guys that go around Kaleb, and honestly, his running mate Jaylen Warren goes behind him, but I personally would prefer Tony Pollard. I prefer Isaiah Pacheco. I'll take Kaleb over Joe Mixon. I prefer RJ Harvey. I prefer Aaron Jones. I prefer David Montgomery. DeAndre Swift is kind of interesting. I could be swayed into going Kaleb Johnson over Swift, but I do think the upside is there with Swift because of that offense, and I'm interested to see that. Now, we talked about Jaylen Warren, and I do want to get to him for a second here. I think Warren, they bring him back, right? They tendered him. They could have let him go. And we saw Jaylen Warren last year, 4.3 yards per carry, right? 5.3 the year before, 4.9 the year before that. But he also is involved in the receiving game, 38 receptions, 310 yards. He had 61 receptions in 2023. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to like having a guy that he can rely on. And I think Rodgers is going to be a guy that's comfortable to check the football down. Ultimately, I think Jaylen Warren is the guy that if I'm drafting anybody in this offense, I'd rather take a shot on him because I don't preferably really like either guy. But if I had to take one, it would be the guy that's just really at the cheaper cost. I think that's really what it comes down to for me, is just the guy that's not as expensive. But